The phone kept vibrating against the cheap plastic cup holder like it was angry at him. Marcus glanced at the screen and saw the voicemail icon again, and the time in the corner that was already past what he could afford. His cold Starbucks sat untouched, a watered-down latte he bought only because he needed something in his hands to feel normal. Up ahead, a silver SUV sat crooked on the shoulder with its hazard lights blinking fast, and next to it a young girl was crouched by a tire, her hair pulled into a messy bun, her face tight like she was trying not to cry. Marcus should have kept going. He should have taken the next exit and made his interview. Instead, he eased onto the shoulder, blinked hard, and felt a tired kind of fear settle in his chest as he put the car in park. Marcus lived in a small one-bedroom apartment in Stone Mountain, Georgia, the kind of place with thin walls and a parking lot that always smelled like hot asphalt. He was 31, tall, usually quiet, and he had the careful posture of someone who tried not to take up too much space. His alarm went off at 5:45 every morning, even on days he had nothing official to wake up for, because letting himself sleep in felt like giving up. He had worked warehouse jobs, delivery jobs, and a short stretch at a print shop until it closed, and now he was in that stressful gap where every day looked the same but the bills didn't stop. His phone carried the weight of it all. The unread emails, the missed calls, the reminders he could not snooze away. That morning mattered more than most. He had an interview at 8:30 with a facilities company in downtown Atlanta, a job with benefits, steady hours, a real chance at breathing room. The email said business casual, bring 2 references, show up 10 minutes early. Marcus ironed the only button-down he trusted, navy blue, and checked the mirror until he started seeing flaws that weren't there. His sister Tasha had called the night before and said she was proud of him, and that made his throat feel tight because he had not heard those words in a long time. He had promised her, and promised himself, that this time he would not be late, would not miss it, would not let something small become another excuse for why his life stayed stuck. But the morning fought him. His car, a tired 2010 sedan with a dashboard light that never turned off, took 3 tries to start. When it finally caught, it coughed like it was offended. The gas gauge sat just above empty even though he had put $10 in it 2 days ago. He turned the radio down and drove in silence because silence felt safer than hope. Traffic on I-285 moved like it always did, with that impatient stop and go that made you grip the steering wheel like you could squeeze time out of it. Marcus kept checking the clock and doing the math over and over. If he made it by 8:15, he could park and breathe. If he made it by 8:20, he could still pull it off. If he made it by 8:25, he would walk in and act like he wasn't sweating through his shirt. He exited onto a stretch near a cluster of fast food places and gas stations, and that's when he saw her on the shoulder. At first he thought she was someone's nanny or a college kid, but when he got closer he saw she wasn't older than 17 or 18. The hazard lights made the SUV look like it was panicking. The tire was shredded down to rubber threads. The girl had her phone in her hand, but she kept staring at it like it had betrayed her. When Marcus slowed, she looked up and their eyes met, and something in her expression shifted from fear to embarrassment, like she hated being seen like this. He should have kept driving. He said that to himself in a flat, practical voice. He should have thought about rent, about the interview, about the stack of bills on the kitchen counter. He should have remembered how many times life had asked him to be the hero and then punished him for it. But his body made the choice before his mind finished arguing. He pulled over behind her and turned on his own hazards. The air outside was already warm and thick, and the sound of cars rushing past had that constant, harsh roar. Marcus stepped out and held his hands up a little, the way you do when you don't want to scare someone. "You okay?" he called, keeping his voice calm. The girl stood up fast, brushing her hands on her jeans even though they weren't dirty. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice cracked on the last word. She tried again. I'm okay. I have a flat." "I can see that," Marcus said gently. "Do you have a spare?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I think so. I don't know where. This isn't my car. Marcus didn't laugh. He had been young once too, thrown into problems that felt too big. Pop the trunk, he said. We'll look. She pressed the button and the trunk lifted. Inside was neat, almost too neat, like someone else always handled the messy parts. There was a gym bag, a folded blanket, a small first aid kit, and then the spare tire tucked underneath with the tools still in plastic. Marcus exhaled because at least this part was simple. He kneeled and started pulling things out, his shirt sleeves already sticking to his arms. The girl hovered, shifting her weight from foot to foot. You don't have to do this, she said. I called roadside. How long ago? Marcus asked. 20 minutes, she said. They said an hour, maybe more. Marcus looked at the traffic, then back at her. She was trying to act tough, but her eyes kept flicking down the road like she expected something bad to happen. This isn't a good spot to wait, he said. You can call whoever you need to call after. She swallowed. My dad is going to freak out. Marcus gave a small nod like he understood, even if he didn't. All right. We'll get you moving. He worked with steady focus, loosening lug nuts and fitting the jack under the frame. His hands knew this. His uncle had taught him when he was 13, out in the driveway with an old Buick, and a lesson that felt like survival. As Marcus turned the wrench, he felt his phone buzz again in his pocket, and the vibration made his stomach tighten. He ignored it and kept going. The girl watched him like she couldn't decide whether to be grateful or suspicious. What's your name? She asked. Marcus, he said. I'm Layla, she said quickly, like saying it made things more real. Thank you. Yeah, Marcus said, trying not to show how much he was thinking about time. Used to stay back from the road. Layla stepped farther onto the grass. She wrapped her arms around herself even though it wasn't cold. You're dressed like you're going somewhere, she said. Marcus paused for half a second, then kept turning the wrench. Interview, he admitted. Layla's face shifted. Oh my God. I'm making you late. He didn't want to blame her, but he also didn't want to lie. Yeah, he said quietly. Probably. Layla's eyes filled fast, and she blinked hard like she refused to let tears fall in front of a stranger. I'm so sorry, she said, and the sincerity in her voice hit Marcus harder than he expected. I didn't mean to. I just didn't know what to do. Marcus tightened the last nut and lowered the car back down. He stood, wiped his hands on a rag from his trunk, and tried to keep his face neutral. It's okay, he said, because that's what he always said, even when things weren't. He picked up the flat and slid it into her trunk, then closed it with a soft thud. Layla pulled her phone up like she was ready to fix this instantly. What's the company? Where are you interviewing? I can. Marcus shook his head. It's not like that, he said. I just need to go. Layla looked at him, and in that look was something like determination, like she wasn't used to being told no when she offered help. At least let me do something, she said. Please. Marcus felt his phone buzz again. This time he pulled it out. A missed call from the number listed in the interview email. His throat tightened. He stared at it too long, like if he stared hard enough, it would turn into a second chance. He looked up and saw Layla watching him, her face serious now. They called you? She asked. Yeah, Marcus said, and his voice came out rough. I'm late. Layla stepped closer, careful, like she didn't want to push him the wrong way. Call them back, she said. Right now. I'll wait. Marcus hesitated with the phone in his hand, the screen bright in the morning sun. He could hear his own thoughts, sharp and panicked. He could also hear another quieter thought, the one that had made him pull over in the first place, telling him that who you are shows up in the moments when it costs you something. He hit the call button and brought the phone to his ear, and Layla stood beside her car with both hands pressed together like she was praying it would work out for him, even though she barely knew him. And as the line started to ring, Marcus had no idea that the girl with the flat tire wasn't just some random stranger on the side of the road, and that the choice he made in the heat and noise of that highway was about to echo into a place he never expected. Marcus stood by his car with the phone pressed to his ear, watching traffic blur past while the line rang. Layla stayed a few steps away, arms crossed tight, eyes fixed on his face like she was trying to read the outcome before it happened. When someone finally picked up, Marcus straightened without meaning to, his voice careful and polite as he explained he was running late due to an unexpected delay. He didn't oversell it. He didn't beg. He just told the truth in the plain way he always did, like honesty might earn him a little grace. The woman on the line listened, asked how late he expected to be, and put him on hold.
Desailen stretched.
Marcus stared at a crack in the asphalt and felt that familiar pressure behind his eyes, the kind that came when hope hovered too close to disappointment. When she came back, her tone was professional but not unkind. She said the hiring manager had already started interviews and wouldn't be able to see him today. She said they'd keep his resume on file. She said good luck. Marcus thanked her, because that was his reflex, and ended the call. He stood there for a moment longer than necessary, phone still in his hand, feeling the weight of the day settle into his shoulders.
The morning sun felt harsher now.
The noise of the road felt louder. He slipped the phone into his pocket and let out a slow breath through his nose.
Layla stepped closer.
I'm really sorry, she said again, softer this time. I know that doesn't fix anything. Marcus shrugged, though it wasn't casual. It is what it is, he said. He hated how practiced that sentence felt. You should probably get going. That spare's good enough to get you where you need to go. Layla nodded but didn't move right away. She looked down the road, then back at him. Can I give you a ride somewhere? She asked. At least to a bus stop or something. Marcus almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the idea of accepting help from a teenager he'd just met felt backwards. I've got a car, he said. I'll be fine. She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. At least let me save your number, she said. In case the tire falls off or something. Or, I don't know. Just in case. Marcus hesitated too. He didn't usually give his number to strangers. But there was something earnest about the way she asked, like she didn't want this moment to disappear as soon as they drove away. He recited the digits, and she typed them in carefully, saving his name with a small smile. Thank you, Marcus, she said again. Really? He nodded, gave her a final look to make sure she was okay, then got back into his car. As he pulled away, he saw her SUV merge into traffic in his rearview mirror, hazard lights off now, moving steady. The moment faded behind him, swallowed by the road. The rest of the day unfolded in that dull, heavy way that followed disappointment. Marcus drove home instead of wandering, because wandering cost gas. He parked in his usual spot and climbed the stairs to his apartment, passing a neighbor he nodded to but didn't stop to talk with. Inside, the apartment felt smaller than it had that morning. He loosened his tie and hung the button down back in the closet like it might still be useful someday. He sat at the small kitchen table and stared at his phone. There were no new emails. No missed calls. He reheated leftover rice and beans and ate standing up, then washed the plate right away because leaving it out made him feel worse. He thought about calling his sister, then decided against it. He didn't want to explain. He didn't want to hear sympathy. He just wanted the day to end. In the afternoon, his phone buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize at first.
Layla, did you make it okay?
Marcus stared at the screen, surprised by how that simple question landed. He typed back.
Marcus, yeah.
I'm home. You?
Layla, I'm good.
Tire held up. Dad's car, so I was extra scared. Marcus paused, then replied. Marcus, you handled it fine. Stuff happens. There was a pause on her end.
Ten anoter mensaje kame trog.
Layla, I keep thinking about your interview. I feel really bad. Marcus leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling. He could ignore it. He could shut the door on this and move on. That was the safer choice. But something about the way she kept checking in made it hard to pretend the moment hadn't mattered. Marcus, it's not your fault. I chose to stop. Layla, most people wouldn't have. Marcus frowned slightly, not sure how to respond. He didn't see himself as special. He just saw someone who did what he could. Still, her words stuck. They exchanged a few more messages, nothing heavy. She told him she was late for school and had to explain herself. He told her to be careful on the spare. When the conversation ended, Marcus realized his chest felt a little lighter than it had all day. That evening, as the sky outside his window dimmed and the sounds of the complex settled into routine, his phone buzzed again. This time it was a voicemail from an unknown number. He let it sit for a minute before playing it. A man's voice came through, calm and measured. He introduced himself as Daniel. He said he was Layla's father. He said Layla had told him about the flat tire and the man who stopped to help her even though he was late for something important. He said he wanted to thank Marcus personally and asked him to call back when he had a moment. Marcus sat still, phone pressed to his ear long after the message ended. He didn't know what to make of it. People didn't usually track him down to say thank you. He replayed the message once more, then set the phone down on the table like it might change shape if he looked at it too long. Outside, a car door slammed.
Someone laughed in the distance.
Life kept moving, indifferent and steady. Marcus stood, poured himself a glass of water, and drank it slowly, his thoughts circling. He didn't know who Daniel was or what he wanted. All he knew was that a small choice on the side of the road had followed him home, and for the first time that day, he felt something like cautious curiosity instead of defeat. Marcus listened to the voicemail again the next morning, standing in his kitchen with the phone pressed to his ear while the coffee maker hissed and sputtered. Daniel's voice still sounded calm, almost too composed, like someone used to being listened to. There was no rush in it, no hint of urgency. Just confidence.
Dat alone made Marcus uneasy.
He didn't call back right away. He told himself he needed to think, but really he was afraid of what the conversation might reveal. People didn't usually reach out unless they wanted something, and Marcus had learned to be careful with expectations. He'd spent too many years getting his hopes up only to watch them fall apart quietly. He went about his morning anyway. Showered. Shaved. Put on a clean t-shirt. He checked job boards on his laptop, scrolling through listings that all seemed to blur together. Entry level. Temporary. Competitive pay, which usually meant not enough. He applied to 2 positions even though his motivation felt thin. Each application asked the same questions in slightly different ways, and by the time he finished, his shoulders felt heavy again. His phone sat face down on the table. Every few minutes, his eyes drifted to it. Around noon, he finally picked it up and dialed the number Daniel had left. The call was answered on the second ring. "Marcus," the man said, like he'd been expecting him. "I'm glad you called." "Yeah," Marcus replied, suddenly aware of how plain his own voice sounded. "You said you wanted to thank me." "I do," Daniel said.
Layla got home safe because of you.
"She told me you missed an interview helping her." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "She didn't owe you that story." Daniel paused, then spoke more gently. "She insisted." She was shaken. And grateful. There was silence on the line, the kind that invited more words. Marcus didn't fill it. Daniel continued. "I won't take much of your time. I just wanted to say thank you properly. And to ask how you're doing."
The question caught Marcus off guard.
He let out a small breath. "I'm all right," he said, because that was the easiest answer. Daniel didn't push. If you're open to it, he said, I'd like to buy you coffee. Just to talk.
No expectations. Marcus hesitated.
His instincts told him to decline. Accepting things from strangers often came with strings. But another part of him, quieter and more tired, wondered if avoiding every unexpected door was how he'd ended up stuck in the same place for so long. Okay, Marcus said.
Café es fine.
They agreed on a cafe in Buckhead later that afternoon. Marcus almost didn't go. He stood in his apartment staring at the mirror, debating whether his clothes looked presentable enough, whether he was reading too much into this. In the end, he grabbed his jacket and left before he could talk himself out of it. The cafe was bright and modern, with clean lines and people working on laptops like they belonged there. Marcus arrived early and sat near the window, watching traffic and feeling out of place. When Daniel walked in, Marcus recognized him immediately, not because he looked flashy, but because he moved like someone used to rooms adjusting around him. Daniel was in his mid-40s, neatly dressed, calm. He smiled easily when he saw Marcus and extended his hand. Thank you for coming, he said. They ordered coffee and sat. For a few minutes, the conversation stayed light. Daniel asked about Marcus's background, where he grew up, what kind of work he'd done. Marcus answered honestly, without polishing the rough edges. He talked about the warehouse jobs, the layoffs, the interview he'd missed. He didn't dramatize it, but he didn't minimize it either. Daniel listened closely, not interrupting. When Marcus finished, Daniel nodded slowly. You know, Daniel said, most people in your position would have kept driving. Marcus looked down at his cup. I didn't think that hard about it. Daniel smiled slightly. That's usually how character works. Marcus shifted in his seat. Look, I appreciate the coffee, he said. But I don't want this to turn into something weird. I didn't help your daughter for anything back. Daniel held up a hand. I understand. I'm not here to hand you a check or make a big gesture. That wouldn't sit right. Marcus studied his face, searching for a catch. Then why are we here?
Daniel leaned back.
Because I run a facilities management company, he said calmly. And because I believe how people act when no one's watching tells me more than any resume ever could. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Are you saying? I'm saying I'd like you to interview again, Daniel said.
Distime wisme.
The words hung between them. Marcus didn't respond right away. He felt a surge of emotion, sharp and confusing. Hope, yes, but also doubt.
Suspicion.
The fear of being disappointed again. You don't know me, Marcus said. You don't know if I'm even good at what you need. Daniel nodded. That's why it would be an interview, not a favor. Marcus swallowed. He thought about all the times life had dangled something in front of him and pulled it away. He thought about the missed interview, the flat tire, the choice he'd made without expecting a reward. I don't want pity, Marcus said quietly.
Daniel met his eyes.
This isn't pity, he said. It's respect. The rest of the conversation passed in a blur. They talked logistics. An office location. A time later that week. Nothing was promised. Nothing was guaranteed. When they stood to leave, Daniel shook Marcus's hand again, firm and steady. Whatever happens, Daniel said, I'm glad we met.
Marcus walked out into the afternoon light feeling unsteady.
Not excited. Not relieved. Just aware that something inside him had shifted. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel completely closed off. It felt fragile, uncertain, and real. As he drove home, Marcus replayed the day in his mind, not as a story of luck, but as a moment of truth. He realized how hard it was for him to accept that doing the right thing might actually lead somewhere. How deeply he'd trained himself to expect nothing. That night, lying on his bed and staring at the ceiling, Marcus felt the weight of the choice he'd made on the highway finally settle. Not as regret, but as responsibility. If this interview happened, if this door opened, he would have to step through it. And that scared him more than missing the first one ever had. Marcus woke up before his alarm the morning of the second interview, his eyes opening to the gray light coming through the blinds. For a moment, he forgot where he was, forgot why his chest felt tight. Then it came back to him slowly, not like panic, but like a weight he had agreed to carry. Today mattered. Not in a magical way. In a practical, grounded way. The kind of way that could change things just enough to make breathing easier. He didn't dress like someone trying to impress. He dressed like himself. Clean slacks. The same navy button down, freshly pressed again. He stood in front of the mirror and noticed the small things this time. The faint lines under his eyes. The way his shoulders had started to slump over the years. He straightened them, not for confidence, but because he realized he deserved to take up his space. The office building was quieter than he expected. Not flashy. Not intimidating. Just glass, steel, and people moving with purpose. Marcus arrived early and sat in the lobby, hands folded, feet planted flat on the floor to steady himself. When Daniel came out to greet him, it felt different than before.
Les personal.
More professional. That reassured Marcus more than anything. The interview was straightforward. Questions about reliability, problem solving, teamwork. Marcus answered honestly. He admitted what he didn't know. He explained how he learned fast. He talked about showing up, about being the person others could count on even when things went wrong. He didn't mention the flat tire. He didn't need to. When it ended, Daniel thanked him and said they'd be in touch. No promises.
No dramatic pause.
Just reality. Marcus walked back to his car and sat there for a long minute before turning the key. He felt proud, not because he thought he'd nailed it, but because he'd shown up fully. He hadn't shrunk himself. He hadn't tried to be someone else. The call came 2 days later while he was folding laundry in his apartment.
Daniel's voice was steady, professional.
The offer wasn't life-changing. It wasn't a leap into luxury. It was a starting salary that paid the bills, benefits that mattered, and hours that made sense. Marcus thanked him and accepted, his voice cracking just slightly at the edges. That night, he called his sister. This time, he let her hear the relief in his voice. The job didn't fix everything. The apartment stayed small. The car still made that coughing sound in the mornings. Some days were exhausting. Some nights, doubt crept back in quietly. But there were small wins.
A steady paycheck.
A routine. A sense that his effort finally had somewhere to land. Weeks later, Marcus ran into Layla again by chance at the same cafe.
She was first, smiling like an old friend.
They talked for a few minutes. About school. About work.
About ordinary things.
Before she left, she thanked him one more time, not like someone who felt guilty, but like someone who understood. Driving home, Marcus thought about how close he'd come to staying in his lane that morning. How easy it would have been to keep driving. Life hadn't rewarded him with perfection. It had given him something quieter and more real. Proof that empathy mattered. That self-worth grew when you acted in alignment with who you wanted to be, not who fear told you to be. As he parked and shut off the engine, Marcus sat in the silence and realized something simple and grounding.
Sometimes the small, inconvenient choices don't save the day.
They save you. And long after the moment passes, they shape the life you slowly build.